What's going on, beautiful J4 family and community? Thank you guys for joining me on a wonderful Wednesday as we chop it up in these J4 conversation spaces, which essentially is a father and son channel with the ambition of creating healthy, grounded, solid, independent, beautiful sons and, of course, daughters. And so today, one of the things I want to process with you a little bit is the power and importance of college, particularly from a cultural relevancy perspective, and how data is something that shapes, informs, and guides cultures that helps them shape their agenda. This is something certainly true for the Black community, the beautiful Black community. And I believe as the interracial, biracial space continues to identify itself in emergence, it will be also something critical for them to evaluate, examine, should they so choose. So before I begin, let me go ahead and say my thank yous. I want to say a special shout out to all the recent subscribers. We've increased by 300 subscribers in the last really 3 weeks, particularly around a video called "White Mothers and their biracial black sons." I think it was that phrasing of biracial black that kind of caused the interest for a lot of viewers who had varying things to say about it. So thank you all who've commented. Thanks to folks who have agreed, and thanks to folks who have disagreed. I've tried as much as possible to share. To respond to comments when and where possible. So if I didn't get to yours, my apologies. We have reached over 4,000 hours watched. If you all understand something about YouTube, if your aim is to monetize, you need 4,000 watch hours over the course of a 12-month period, and then also 1,000 plus subscribers. So we're not quite there on the subscribers yet, but we're there on the watch hours, which is unique, and we're very thankful for that. So if you like the subject matter, hey, please consider giving us a subscription as we reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Special shout out to Mulatto Vanguard in the house. Mulatto, salute, brother. Hope all is well. San Diego State alumni. Um, Mulatto Vanguard, yeah, your channel is growing, man. Thank you so much for the collaboration that we recently did. Hopefully, that had brought some attention and subject matter to your channel as well. So today, I really just want to talk to parents about should you choose to be intentional about sending your beautiful seeds to college. That is something you want to think about very, very early on in their development process, because there are certain choices and certain exposure points that you'll want to think about as you prepare them to be successful in college. And so, before I get into some of the data, let me give a little bit of context. Okay. So I believe culture is four things: race, kind of born into it. In my case, I'm a biracial kid, European white mother, Creole black father. Culturally, I identify as black, although I'm sort of learning in these spaces about the shifting demographics and dynamics around identity, particularly as it relates to a modern generation compared to my era, being a cat born in 1968. It is also customs, things that sort of govern you, combine you, give you boundaries. Those can be things around aesthetics, language, ritual, customs, those kind of things. But also an element of communalism. I think certain cultures, particularly black cultures, have an element of communalism tied into it. But then the fourth one, and perhaps the most important one by my definition, is action. Right? What do you do on behalf of cultural uplift, however you choose to define your beautiful culture, whether that's black or if you are a person born of two people of different backgrounds and heritages and you identify as biracial? What are you doing on behalf of uplifting the beautiful cultural community from which you come? All right. So, in order to be relevant to your culture, you have to know something about it. You have to know something about it. And there's two ways of sort of learning and discovering new content and new information. One is you're either autodidactic, meaning you're self-taught, you have a certain kind of internal drive for knowledge and information, and you don't need motivation, you don't need an external entity encouraging you. You're just guided through a passion to be self-taught, right? Think of Goodwill Hunting, right? He said, you paid $150,000 for your education. All I had was $1.50 library card, right? So I don't want to put any kind of elite status on those who go to college. This is not that channel. I believe if you don't have a degree, beautiful. If you have a degree, beautiful. Many of our parents, particularly those of us who are first generation kids. Our parents didn't go to college and have been very solid, loving, contributing people to the broader society. So this is not an elitist conversation in the space of college, but in order to understand something about your beautiful cultural community and then to be relevant to it, you do have to sort of study it. When we looked at the 9 criteria to make the question of biracial identity having sort of a momentum and legitimacy in a modern time, one of it was, is it studied, right? Are there people that are doing research so that you can tell a distinctive story about a biracial kind of community? And so college is a space where you do have a formal learning. So there's audactic, which is self-taught, and then there's also formal education, which passed compulsory education in the United States of America, which is high school. And then if you choose to continue on, the formal education is in the space of college. All right. Now, given that much of my work and focus is on culture, or particularly the rearing of Black and biracial sons, let's talk about the diversification of higher education. So America, from its inception, was not a very diverse place. It had diverse people, but it didn't have this necessary living up to the constitutional ideals of its formation. The first institution of higher education was 1636. That was Harvard University. And if you can imagine the time, the attendees at Harvard University were largely male, almost exclusively male. They were exclusively white male, and they tended to come from families of privilege, meaning they had financial resources, they had community standing, they had network, they had cachet in that space. And the sons of these aristocratic kinds of people were the ones who predominantly went to college, beginning in its first inception in 1636 here, within the emergence of the United States of America. And it's not really until the latter part of the 19th century, where in the North you see the founding of historically Black colleges and universities, which essentially is to teach basic educational foundations to free Black people in the North. And then following Emancipation Proclamation, you see a booming of historically Black colleges and universities, primarily in the South in post 1865. A book that really captures this is a book called White Architects of Black Education. If you're interested in the phenomena of how Blacks immediately following emancipation were then acclimated or acculturated during a Reconstruction period, primarily in the South, you see a lot of new HBCUs that are formed largely by the Methodist religious institutions. And as you can imagine, they go from illegal to be taught, or it's illegal to read, to now you have to sort of try to enfranchise a group of people under Northern soldiers sort of observation in freedom schools, but rooted in a Southern kind of construction. And so Reconstruction was a very aggressive time where they were trying to formally educate recently freed Africans or recently freed enslaved folks to sort of give them a foundation of beginning independence. And so you see a lot of teacher colleges, a lot of basic fundamentals around arithmetic, and then also a lot around agriculture. The dollars that were used to really elevate historically Black colleges and universities were land grant institutions, which were really formal educational opportunities to teach around agriculture, so that communities could go and industrialize themselves and go from a human labor kind of model into a more technological or industrial kind of model. And out of that, rather than integrate into existing universities, certain schools, particularly in the South, decided they were going to build separate institutions for Black folks of the time. And so out of that, you see an explosion of historically Black colleges and universities. And so Black folks have been going to school, college, for almost about a little less than 2 centuries at the time. But you still don't see an explosion in college attendance rates, because at that point you had to be academically qualified, and then you had to be able to afford it. You had to be able to pay for it. And so if you understand economic distribution over the decades, Black folks certainly weren't in a space of high affordability for college. That was a very selected. You had to identify who was the shining star, who was academically gifted, and folks would pool their resources or identify a benefactor or churches and civic groups would pool their resources to send sort of one or two children off to college. And so it was kind of a rare thing comparatively en masse, especially statistically, when you can compare it today. So the first opportunity by which the federal government gets involved is through the GI Bill of 1944, which was exclusively assigned to GIs who had served, who were now veterans, and it set aside funding for them to go to college. So people of color, to include Black folk, biracial folks of the time, then had some seed monies that they could then put towards formal education to address the issue of merit plus financial means, right? Absence financial means, you could be highly notorious, highly intelligent, but if you didn't have the finances to go, you had to go choose other kinds of careers and pathways. The GI Bill, for a select percentage of human beings, was a way in which affordability could now be addressed. The kind of diversification that we see in higher education today comes primarily from the mid 60s, all right, particularly the Higher Education Act of 1966, I think it was. That did two things. It introduced TRIO programs, which were federally funded programs addressing first generation students to either teach them how to be successful in high school, to expose them to college pathways, to help them be successful in college, and then ultimately to be retained and then graduate in college. TRIO programs still exist today, and they have been instrumental in changing the first generation trajectory of countless families. TRIO is not based upon race, it's based upon income and first generation status. But given the absence of access to higher education in significant numbers, clearly a disproportionate number of folks who are first generation and low income fall into the black and brown and Native American families. So that was something that came out of the Higher Education Act. And then the one that perhaps is most relevant to all of us, myself included, that's when the federal government introduced financial aid. And financial aid, y'all, was the one a few times in life where the poorer you were, the better off you were. And so historically, you had to have merit and affordability. Financial aid in a sort of a lesser of two evils that kind of indebt you in loans, but it would give you Pell Grants. It would determine a family need, and then it would try to meet that need through a combination of grants, institutional scholarships, work study, and loans. And countless people of all different backgrounds and hues have been going to college on financial aid, and despite the debt, they have achieved the degree, and their proverbial familial circumstances have changed because of this certification process that the United States of America puts a major premium on. So let me pause there and say, what's going on, beautiful people? Thank you guys for joining me. I'm about to share the statistics around graduation rates by race. I was very curious about this. It's one of the few times I've seen two or more races included as well, so I'll share that with you. But right now we're talking about the diversification of higher education. I believe the explosion that you see in interracial couples is a direct result of financial aid, because now people could afford college. They were going to colleges outside their own region. They were continuing to go to HBCUs, but were also then beginning to go to predominantly white institutions. A lot of that was initially led by athletic recruitment, but more and more universities were beginning to reach out to diversify their campus. And as they became more and more diverse people of different backgrounds were coming together. They were discovering each other. They were socializing, normalizing historical rigid racial lines. They were coming from rural centers into urban corridors, and they were meeting people, and they were demystifying this rigid raciality that had perhaps been symbolic of the 60s and to a lesser extent the 70s. And lo and behold, proximity then sort of encouraged socialization, in some instances encouraged dating and those kind of things. And more people began to enter into interracial relationships, then went into workforces. That also was another space for engagement, socialization. And you go from 3% interracial marriages in the 70s to upwards of 18% today. And a lot of that has to do with the affordability of college that was not there prior to the Financial Aid or Higher Education Act of the mid 60s. But you introduce financial aid, and all of a sudden you have a diversification of a space that historically had been gatekept by those who had merit or at least name recognition, legacy. and who could pay for it. Financial aid became an equal common denominator, an equalizing entity, and lo and behold, we have a diversification in higher education. Now, let me pause there. Appreciate you guys joining in. Love to know who's in these boxes here. If you are a parent of a biracial kid, love to know that. If you're a black parent of a monolithically black student, would love to know that. Want to get a sense if you're preparing them for college. But the premise here is, how do cultures do the action of culture? And the action of culture is understanding data sets and then being proactive to improve those data sets as a way of participating in cultural uplift. So let's get into the data. So the title of this is Number of College Graduates 2022 by Race, Gender, Age, and State Statistics. I'm just going to focus in on race, but this is the most current data set. It was in 2022. Okay, it was done by an entity called Research Doc. The subscription is the source is in the description if you want to click the link and learn more about it, verify the data, or take a look at some other data sets. So thank you guys for joining me. Truly appreciate you. All right. Now this is an astronomical number. In the box, what percentage of people over the age of 25 do you think have at least a bachelor's degree? I wonder what you think. I have not looked at this data set maybe in 10 years, and it has jumped up exponentially. There was a time when very few people went to college, but now given the push and the premium on college, you ask an 18-year-old, what are you going to do after high school? And they discovered if you told the old people, I'm going to go to college, they would leave them alone, right? There's this premium that's been placed on college, way more so than in any other time period of life. To the detriment of apprentice, to the detriment of kind of professional kind of work, plumbers, electricians, those kind of things. So certainly need to balance that out. There's also been an uptick in entrepreneurialism. But the number I see, Hybrid Vigor, good to see you. Hybrid says 20% or less. Yeah. Well, the last time I checked the data set, it was 28% of individuals over the age of 25 who had a college degree. But that was moons ago. That was a while ago. Nearly 4 in 10 Americans aged 25 and older have a bachelor's degree, a share that has grown over the last decade. As an aggregate, as of 2021, check this out, y'all. Check this out, Hybrid. 37.9% of adults in this age group held a bachelor's degree, including 14.3% who also obtained a graduate or professional degree, according to the data from the U.S. Census. That share is up 7.5 percentage points from 30.4% in 2011. More and more people are being educated, which is a good thing, although it's sort of challenging the value of a bachelor's degree compared to historical times. But more and more people, 37.9% of individuals over the age of 25 have a college degree. That's an astronomical number. It says a lot about the workforce. It says a lot about family priorities. It says a lot about the premium on education. And so it's definitely being something that's highly valued in our society. What that means in perpetuity, I don't know, but at some point there's going to be a tipping point. Is the number in university different? Okay, so let me see. I'm assuming you're saying, did I say college? So this would reflect universities. These are bachelor's degrees, Hybrid Vigor. Is the number in university different? So as of 2021, 37.9% of adults over the age of 25 held a bachelor's degree or more, including 14.3 who have a graduate or professional degree. So that is a university, right? That's a 4-year bachelor degree granting university. If you were to look at an associate's degree, over 50% of people will have their associate's degree compared to those who don't go on, and then 37.9% will get their bachelor's degree. So hopefully that answers your question. University is more higher learning than college. Okay, so Hybrid Vigor is semantically making a distinction between college and university. He is absolutely correct. A community college has the word college in it. could be an associate's degree granting institution only. So in this, I'm using them interchangeably. So college and university, but to be more precise and accurate, these numbers are for universities. A college is a lot more like hands-on type of work, right? Yeah. So a college can be, it can teach you to be a fireman, policeman, those kind of things, more practical kinds of things, more skill uplift, right? You're going there to enhance or to credential or to improve certain skill sets, to where university, typically the purpose is for degree attainment, right? Yeah, so like mechanics, be a chef. Great distinction there. This is university. These are bachelor granting institutions that I'm talking about, okay? Now, the 37% is a critically important percentage, parents. And I invite you to think about whether or not you want to pathway your beautiful seeds into this, because there are certain jobs in the broader society that have a minimum requirement of a bachelor's degree. That means 60, whatever the math is on that, 62% of human beings simply cannot qualify for these jobs. They could have the intellect, they could have the skill set, they could have the talent, but if they don't meet that minimum requirement of a bachelor's degree, 62% of people will not have access to these jobs. All right. There is a correlation between the amount of education you have, formal education, and the degree, and the earnings over a lifetime. There is a correlation. There's also a correlation between the amount of education you have and the quality of life, right? Educational attainment and its correlation to health, its correlation to the inverse, which is crime, the correlation to savings, all those kinds of things. So even though college sort of introduces folks to general themes across a wide range of subjects, it talks about sort of macro subject matter, and then at the upper level, it drills down into the minutia of very specific kind of intellectual content, therefore giving a person a succinct set of so-called expertise that they then, by certification of the degree, at least allegedly have a skill set and a competency to do the work that the job is asking for from the minimum qualification. And so I put a premium on college for my children, not only because I benefited from it in terms of the degree completion, but also the experience itself. Taught me a lot about the world, taught me a lot about my individual self. As mentioned in previous videos, it was a place that I discovered myself intellectually, but also culturally. It was a chance for me to move and groove within Black spaces, and allowed me to kind of come out of the proverbial biracial gray, which was consistent with my time on the West Coast, and to land in a cultural space. And that has been very much a guiding, nurturing space for me, even up to my age now. Again, I recognize the new generational nuance, but even in colleges, you're seeing more and more dialogue, more and more organizations, and more biracial folks who are finding communities among themselves and having critically important dialogues relevant to their cultural community. So the 37% have access to limited jobs, and these jobs have an economic correspondence to it, and they do have a correlation to an improved quality of life. But again, if you don't have a college degree, beautiful. I'm sure you're going to do your thing in profoundly beautiful ways. So now, so college is also a formal learning space. So how does one take their learning to benefit themselves, of which their opportunities should benefit themselves, but should they be so inclined? And I believe if you're of a communal mindset, which is something very valuable that comes from the Black cultural experience, and possibly biracial will need to navigate whether they take on individualistic mindsets from a white paternal dynamic, I'm generalizing, or sort of Black cultural communal mindsets from a Black father and a black-white biracial relationship. But these are things to think about. If you are communal, then what is the action of culture? And that is in part to understand data sets, to see where the gaps are, see where the praise and promise is, and then to live a life in some way that is seeking to improve the cultural community you come from. So before I share the racial breakdown, I want to see if there's any questions, Hybrid. I appreciate you sharing. I don't know, Mulatto, if you're still up in here. Love to know who we chopping with. Good to see you guys. All right. Not having seen any, let me take a sip of water. All right, college graduation rates are presented in three dynamics. They tell a 4-year graduation rate because that is sort of the norm that's associated with college. They typically talk about a 4-year process. However, in the modern time, less than 20% will graduate in 4 years. I don't know if you all were on the 4-year track or if you were on the 5-year track like I was, but just given whatever the circumstances, the nuances are, very small percentages of students will finish in 4 years, less than 20%. Okay. They typically will tell it in 6-year graduation rates because that is where you kind of turn the corner and the numbers get a little bit more substantial from a PR perspective. It's better to tell a 50-60% graduation rate than a less than 20% graduation rates. That's just sort of the PR campaign that universities tend to follow. So this is actually a 5-year graduation rate. Okay, so it's not quite 4 years, and it's not the typical one of 6 years, but a 5-year graduation rate. All right. So let's get your opinions here. What do you all think the graduation rate is for white folks? White folks. This 5-year graduation rate. This is 2022, right? Those who started in whatever number of years they were examined last year. After 5 years, those who graduated. 100% started. 5 years later, they're evaluated. What percentage walked across that stage with a bachelor's degree? So this is of the 37.9%. When you break that down racially, what percentage do you think white folks graduated? Folks not listening. That's cool. 62.2%. 62.2% of white folks of the 37.2% graduated within 5 years. 62.2%. Hybrid Vigor says, I would say 20% attrition. Okay, that means leaving, like 80%. All right. So you are what you're saying is every college president's dream, every vice president for enrollment's dream is to have 80%. Some institutions have difficulty retaining students at an 80% freshman retention rate, right? Some institutions have difficulty retaining at a freshman rate. So 62.2% actually are retained that are white. What do you think it is for Hispanic? Howard said he overshot. I'm gonna put you up here, Howard. So like 80%. It is 41.5% for Hispanic, Latino identifying folks, Latinx, 41.5%. All right. So white, 62.2% graduation rates, Hispanic, 41.5%. For African American folks or Black folks, it is 40.5%. 40.5%. Again, white folks, 62.2%, 41.5% for Hispanic, 40.5% for beautiful Black folk. All right. Asian Pacific Islander is the highest. They're all kind of cultural, sociological kinds of conversations you can have around this. They are at 69.3%. 69.3%. Okay. I'll do multiracial last, which they're defining as 2 or more. American Indian is 39.3. 39.3% will graduate after 5 years, which is a significantly higher number than it had been in the past. A lot of intentionality towards the Native community and by the Native Indigenous community, right? So again, white folks 62.2%, Hispanics 41.5%, Black folks 40.5%, Asian Pacific Islanders 69.3%, American Indian 39.3%, and multiracial defined as 2 or more. Y'all give it to me. Native Indian or Eastern Indian, Native American like Navajo, Tana, Alton, Pima, Sioux, Croy. Yeah. All right. What do y'all think it is for multiracial? I'm gonna pause there. I want to get your input. There's 5 of y'all up in here by my box standards. What do y'all think it is for multiracial? And this is new data, right? 2000 census starts capturing this in very formidable ways. People have data sets from the U.S. Census 2022, two or more races is being measured. What do y'all think it is? Hybrid's asking Native Indian or East Asian. East Indian, yeah. So East Indian would be, if I'm understanding it correct, would be international. Your international rate is not shown in this data set. They just dealt with domestic demographics, but international is going to be closer associated with the Asian Pacific Islander, even though they're talking about U.S. citizens, Asian Pacific Islander. But international students, for various reasons, understandably, they'll have typically the highest retention rate or somewhere on par with the Asian Pacific Islanders, so upwards of 69, 70%. Okay. Hybrid Vic, it's hard to tell because we don't know the range of multiracial mixes exist in that group, right? So this is two or more races, so it could be black, white, could be Asian, Hispanic, could be native white, right? So hybrid is saying yes. White, Asian are the most common mix. I've also seen American Indian and white. And then East Indian would be people from like India. Yeah, yeah. So international folks, Chinese, a lot of Chinese international students here in the environment, as well as Indian folks, folks from United Emirates as well. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. All right. So for multiracial folks, again, two or more, not defined as black, white, which typically is the conversation we have here, is 50.4%. 50.4%. All right. 62 for white folk, 41 for Hispanic, 40 for black, Asian Pacific Islander, 69, multiracial, 50%, American Indian, 39%. It is a very interesting conversation. I work in higher education, and we often talk about the retention dynamics, and then you inevitably want to explore the why. That's not for this particular conversation, but it is a fascinating conversation when you stratify a data set with people in a common space having potentially similar experiences, and then looking at the disparate outcomes of the experience. And inevitably, you have to look at what they're experiencing when they're there. What are some of the causes for the disparity in retention rates, and then ultimately graduation rates. But then at some point, you also have to look at the experience prior to arrival. And to me, there's a lot of historical nuances that play themselves out in modern times, and that is also playing itself out within collegiate spaces, particularly around a sense of welcome, retention, and graduation. All right. Now, so today, the question I want to open it up to the community, should there be interest, is what can you do to improve the college completion rates in your community? Right. I'm being very narrow here. I'm being very specific. Again, I believe culture is more than just aesthetics. Culture has action. Data sets give you an understanding of where you fit as a cultural community on in a host of different kind of variables. And if you are so aligned, then what can you do to work on behalf of cultural uplift in very unique kind of data sets? I'm not suggesting your passion is college completion rates. It could be a number of other things, other variables that have stratification based upon racial and cultural lines. But for purposes of this conversation, I'd be interested in your input if you had any. All right, let me see. I got an invitation to the Golden Key Society as a black-white biracial. Is there some pun intended there? Hybrid. All right. So there's already national efforts, y'all. There's already federal efforts. I talked about them primarily around financial aid and TRIO programs. There's also state efforts to support college attendance, high school completion, and college graduation, largely in the programs that are offered within university environments, but also state dollars that are sent there to supplement high need kind of communities. Then while on campus, you have organizations, Greek organizations, cultural organizations who serve a variety of roles within their mission statement, often is to retain and to create a sense of community among their target audience. A lot of those organizations are cultural in nature, to include all the cultures that make up the broad family, human family, and in some instances, perhaps in smaller numbers, even organizations that will follow or in their mission are focusing on biracial communities. And then certainly there are several African American or Black organizations who have been established and around for decades and who have been supporting retention and ultimate graduation of their cultural community. There's also local and cultural efforts. One of the most beautiful things I ever saw is I was driving around my campus on a Saturday, and I saw this huge proportion of Asian Pacific American folks. Later discovered they were Chinese, but that community had gotten together and created a Saturday school. And they had rented one of our major buildings, had a bunch of classrooms, had to be hundreds of beautiful young babies, young teenagers, young kids, parents, and they all, went into this building. And I didn't investigate it, but I learned that they were teaching martial arts, they were teaching language, they were teaching their spiritual system. They were getting ahead in sort of math kind of subjects, but the community got together and had a Saturday school for their community to teach their traditions, their history, their customs. That was one of the most beautiful things I had seen, where a community got together and had that kind of agency to ensure that its beliefs, its status, its ideals were perpetually passed on to their children. They were in K-12 kind of environments. They were probably in community organizations, neighborhoods, all these kind of things. But when it came to the mind, to the brain, to the growth of their beautiful children and seeds, they were not going to leave that up to a public educational system or a third party kind of organization. They took that under their own reins and domain and practiced a very high active cultural agency to be responsible for the continued perpetuation of knowledge, customs, history, tradition, to take that on as a three-generation entity, grandparents, parents, and the recipients of the love and the information and the content being the beautiful babies of varying kind of age sets. I thought that was a high active cultural agency, and certainly something to emulate. All right. Only the top 50% of university get the invitation. All right. Congratulations to you, brother. Golden Key International Honor Society. All right. Appreciate you. All right. So my question today, I want to open it up, is the federal government's doing something, state institutions are doing something, organizations within collegiate spaces are doing things. There's local and cultural efforts that you might see in various parts of the country or state that you're in. But also individuals. What are the individual efforts that we as parents can do to ensure our children ultimately graduate from college, should we decide to send them there? So I will put the invite in, see if you all have some recommendations as what we can do as parents, given that this is a parent-centered page. Would love to know what you are planning, what questions you all might have, what recommendations do you have to ensure that your beautiful seeds are not only finishing high school strong, going to colleges with minimal loan accumulation, and then graduating and joining the 37.9%. And I say all this because there is a correlation, beautiful family. There is a correlation of beautiful Black parents. There is a correlation, beautiful interracial parents of biracial children. There is a correlation between generational changing of proverbial circumstances based upon the educational attainment of mama and daddy. All right. So I put the link up there. Would love for anyone to come up should you have questions, critiques, and or comments. While we're waiting, I'm going to share a couple of strategies for individuals. Hope all is well on a wonderful Wednesday. All right. So the first thing is grades count in high school. They don't count up to middle school. It'd be hard to find your child's academic record prior to high school unless they go look on the refrigerator, mom and dad's refrigerator. So high school grades begin to count. The freshman year conversation is critically important with the high school counselor, because it is at that time that the high school counselor will track you one of two ways. One of the ways will be to go to college or to just simply graduate with a high school certificate. Colleges, for the most part, look at 16 competency requirements around the area of history, fine arts, math, science, English, and I believe that's it. They're looking for 16 competencies. Your child may graduate with their 21 credits of high school, whatever the case may be. That is not the GPA that a college will look at. A college will look at 16 competencies in the core subject matter that predict college success. Okay, math, science, English, history, fine arts, in some cases, language. All right, that's what high colleges are looking at. So if you know your babies are going to go to college, you need to make sure the counselor knows that so that they are tracking them into a college set of courses so that they can establish a GPA, and then they can that will then determine which type of university they can apply to, but also equally important, will establish the currency. The GPA is sort of the currency of potential future scholarships. The higher the GPA, the higher likely it is of a certain kind of scholarships. Okay. All right. Come on up if you're interested. Love to have you up. The other piece is begin to plant the reality of college into your beautiful seeds early, right? This is easier if you have a degree, mom and dad, or mom and or dad, right? Because you've been to college, you understand it, you've broken the cycle of first generation, unless you're multi-generational college students. But begin to demystify spaces, right? College can be seen as this thing on the hill, right? It can be primarily associated with sports. But no, if you have a campus there in your local area, go to it often. They offer a lot of public events, community events, events appropriate to family. Go ahead and check them out, right? Take advantage of what's there locally, what your tax dollars are supporting, and experience the very high level and quality of programming that comes onto university environments, right? If you travel, check out if there's a university in that space and take a look, right? Sign up for a campus tour, walk it out, get a feel for the architecture, get a feel for the admission requirements, the collegiality, the energy of a formal learning kind of space, right? So take visits, help demystify college space, plant seeds in your beautiful children as to that this is a destination. It is a place for them, and it can also underscore your regular messages about the importance of doing well academically. I know as a father, and my wife and I were always stressing the importance of good grades to our seeds, and not just because, but because grades were the currency of opportunity after high school, whether in the form of scholarship or college choices, or equally important, just laying an intellectual foundation that humans build upon as they get older and grown. Okay. Also, particularly in cultural communities, there's a lot of community groups of a cultural nature. Greek organizations come to mind that have youth programs that are teaching various things around coming of age, doing well at the K-12 level, but also planting seeds about college, right? The kind of pipeline programs. So those are things to get involved with from, just as families, having your kids join organizations. And then the last thing I'll share, not the last thing, but test prep. Test prep. If you want to know the secret to certain cultural communities doing very well on SAT and or ACT, it's test prep. Test prep. You can prep for the PSAT, which is the preliminary SAT. That's the test that determines national merit, which typically are full rides to any institution. You want to start test prep as early as the ninth grade, certainly the 10th grade. That's going to be an economic investment. I don't quite know what the price was. I don't remember what I paid for my kids, but it seemed to me like it was in the thousands, right? But you invest 1,000, you invest 1,500 when they're 14, 15, all of a sudden they have exponential improvement on grades, not because they've gained new information. It tells them how to take the test, right? How to successfully answer questions or the best chances statistically on questions they don't know. It reiterates certain kind of formulas, particularly in the space of math, that will likely show up, right? It teaches them word epistemology, if that's the word for it, right? It teaches them how to take the test. It also puts them through the test multiple times, and it becomes familiar with them. So they're not seeing it for the very first time. I don't know your economic situation. That's not my business. But I would say this 1,000, 1,500, whatever the investment is, That's what cultures do when they want their babies to advance, is they prepare them for major kinds of situations that will be looked at and evaluated, and will as a bar, a threshold, that if you're below it, opportunity's gone. If you're above it, opportunities still open. You still have to be very diligent and tenacious, but opportunities. The goal for us as parents is to make sure our beautiful seeds have as many opportunities available to them. Test prep is one of those things. Also, somewhat in that space as well. I've my family and I have invested significant dollars in this space, but not all subject matter is going to be a point of expertise for your seed, right? Your kid may be beautiful in science, but not in literature. They may be solid in history, but not in math, right? Where are their deficiencies in terms of their overall learning, and how do you put tutors in front of them, right? Put tutors in front of them, schedule that out, pay in advance, let them go there, not just to test prep, but to just get solid, fundamental understanding in core subject areas. These things will be wonderful for them when they're managing adulthood, because they have this foundational intellectual stabilization. But again, it also impacts grades. Grades are what is used to measure for college admissions. Grades are also what is used to apply for scholarship opportunities. You couple scholarships, type of college you're attending, and then financial aid to fill in the gaps, and your babies are positioned to go to college. And then we know one of the biggest factors that makes a person drop out of college is affordability. They cannot afford it. And so investing significant positive pressure on your seeds while they're in high school so they can compete for financial resources will help diminish one of the biggest barriers to college completion, which is financially. They just can't afford it, and they make life choices as all human beings do. All right. So that's what I wanted to kind of share with you from an individual perspective. Love your feedback, comments, and/or disagreements as I'm getting ready to close out. Hopefully, y'all found some value in this. Once again, college graduation rates are not the same across cultural communities. Graduation rates are not the same across cultural communities. The federal government is attempting to do something about it. Organizations, local and national, are attempting to do something about it. What can we do as individual families about it? And then, should you so called feel as if you have a cultural community, whether that's Black, whether that's biracial, or whoever else is listening in with your beautiful culture, can the culture come together? Are there opportunities for the culture to come together? Not just to celebrate, not just to honor heroes and sheroes, but to be intentional about preparing your beautiful seeds to understand what your culture values, what your culture believes in, its customs, its traditions, depending on its evolution, its spiritual system, whatever kind of gives it meaning and definition beyond phenotype and aesthetic appearance. What is its roots? What is its customs, right? Whatever gives it that glue, how do you teach that formally, right? How do you teach that formally? If you are of a communal mindset, the question makes sense to you. If you're of an individualistic mindset, perhaps it doesn't. But if culture is important to you, it can't just be celebratory or aesthetics. It needs to have action, in my opinion. Action is based upon where discrepancies in data are, things you want to continue to advance. You praise it, you implement it, you encourage it. Things that you do not, that don't work on behalf of your culture, how do you eliminate it? How do you teach it out of the culture? How do you overcome it? All of that, all of that requires collective conversation, examination of data, and then individual family actions on behalf of personal uplift and cultural uplift. All right. Not seeing any more comments or questions. I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for riding with me. Truly appreciate it. I hadn't been on here about a week. I was off, and I was off taking my beautiful daughter to college, which made me sort of think about this subject matter. But it's good to be back here. And once again, beautiful family, thank you guys for really the increased subscriptions. Thank you guys for watching the videos, your comments. I truly appreciate it. I'm having fun in this space. And if you too are concerned, or not concerned, but want to be a part of a community that's talking about parent strategies for beautiful Black children and or beautiful biracial children, hey, come on in. Let's continue to chop. Tell someone about it, and check out some of these other videos. Hopefully, they have relevancy to you. On behalf of J4 Conversations, love, love, love.